Lena and Jake were thrilled to have finally found their dream home, a quaint little house with a white picket fence and a beautiful garden. It was perfect, and they couldn't wait to start their new life together. But little did they know that their dream home had a dark and terrifying past. The first night in their new home, Lena and Jake were awoken by strange noises coming from the walls. It sounded like a child's laughter, but there were no children living in the neighborhood. They shrugged it off, thinking it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. But as the days went by, the noises only got worse. Doors would slam shut on their own, objects would move on their own, and strange shadows would appear on the walls. Lena started to feel uneasy in the house, but Jake dismissed her fears as irrational. One day, while cleaning out the attic, Lena stumbled upon a box of old newspapers from the 1950s. As she flipped through the pages, she came across an article that sent chills down her spine. It was about a little girl who was murdered in the very same house they were now living in. The killer was never caught. Lena couldn't shake off the feeling that the ghost of the little girl was haunting them. She decided to do some research on the murder and went to the local library to dig deeper. There she found out that the little girl's name was Emily, and she was only 6 years old when she was brutally murdered in her own bedroom. Determined to uncover the truth behind Emily's murder, Lena and Jake started to investigate. They talked to the neighbors who had lived in the area for years, and they even went to the police station to look at old files. Their investigation led them to a retired police officer who had worked on the case. He revealed to them that Emily's father was the prime suspect, but he had an alibi and was never charged. The officer also told them that Emily's mother had disappeared around the same time as the murder and was never found. Lena and Jake started to connect the dots, and they realized that the killer was still out there, and he or she was probably someone they knew. They started to feel like they were being watched, and their fears were confirmed when they found a threatening note on their front doorstep. The note read, "Leave now, or you'll be sorry." Lena and Jake knew they had to leave, but they didn't want to give up on their dream home. They decided to set up cameras in the house to catch any suspicious activity. One night, while reviewing the footage, they saw a shadowy figure moving through the house. They followed the figure's movements until it led them to a hidden room in the basement. Inside the room, they found a shrine dedicated to Emily, with pictures, candles, and other objects. Lena and Jake were horrified, and they realized that the killer was still living in the house. They quickly called the police, who arrived just in time to catch the killer. It turned out to be Emily's father, who had been living in the house all these years. He had gone insane after Emily's murder and had been living in the hidden room in the basement. The police also discovered the mother's body buried in the backyard. Lena and Jake were relieved that they had solved the mystery and that the killer was finally behind bars. They decided to sell the house and move on with their lives. They realized that sometimes the past can come back to haunt you, and it's best to let go of the past and move forward. It was supposed to be a fun camping trip for 5 teenagers: Mike, Sarah, Alex, Tyler, and Emma. They had planned to spend the weekend in the wilderness, surrounded by nature, far away from the stresses of their everyday lives. However, their plans took a dark turn when they stumbled upon an abandoned military base. As they explored the base, they noticed that everything was old and rusty, as if it had been abandoned for decades. However, they also noticed that the base had been equipped with the latest technology, which was strange. They decided to investigate further and soon discovered a hidden underground facility. The entrance to the facility was heavily guarded, but the teenagers managed to sneak in and detect it. Inside, they found themselves in a dimly lit corridor that seemed to go on forever. As they walked further, they noticed that the walls were lined with strange machines and scientific equipment. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise coming from one of the rooms. They cautiously approached the source of the noise and found a laboratory. The room was filled with bubbling test tubes and strange chemicals. It was then that they noticed a strange creature in a glass container. It looked like a mutated human being, with tentacles instead of arms and a mouth that stretched across its entire face. As they were looking at the creature, they heard footsteps approaching. They quickly hid behind a nearby shelf, hoping to avoid being seen. The footsteps got closer and closer until they were right outside the room. The teenagers held their breath as a group of scientists entered the room. The scientists were discussing something in hushed tones, but the teenagers couldn't make out what they were saying. Suddenly, one of the scientists noticed that the container holding the creature was empty. Panic set in as the scientists realized that the creature had escaped. The teenagers watched in horror as the scientists ran out of the room, leaving them alone with the creature. They quickly realized that they needed to get out of the facility before the creature found them. As they ran through the dark corridors, they could hear the creature's tentacles slapping against the walls. They knew they had to find a way out, but the facility was like a maze, and they were lost. Finally, they found an exit door, but it was locked from the other side. They were about to give up when they noticed a security guard approaching. They banged on the door and screamed for help, but the guard ignored them and walked past. As they were about to give up hope, the door suddenly opened. It was the guard who had just walked past them. He looked terrified, as if he had seen a ghost. He told them to follow him and led them through a secret passage that he had discovered. The passage led them to a room filled with military equipment, including weapons and armor. The guard told them that they could use the equipment to fight off the creature and escape. Armed with weapons, the teenagers made their way back to the laboratory, where they encountered the creature. They fought bravely, firing their weapons and slashing at the creature with their knives. The creature fought back fiercely, but the teenagers were determined to survive. In the end, they managed to defeat the creature and escape the facility. As they made their way back to civilization, they realized that they had stumbled upon a top-secret military experiment that had gone terribly wrong. They had narrowly escaped becoming test subjects themselves. The teenagers were forever changed by their experience. They knew that they had faced a great danger and had come out alive. They had learned to never take life for granted and to always be prepared for the unexpected. They had survived a nightmare that had been meant to be hidden from the world. The Jones family was excited to move into their new house. It was a large, beautiful home with a big yard and plenty of space for their family of 4. The realtor had told them that it had been built on an old burial ground, but the family had dismissed it as a harmless superstition. As the family began to settle in, strange things began to happen. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut, and they heard strange noises coming from the walls. At first, they thought it was just their imagination, but as the occurrences became more frequent, they began to suspect that something was amiss. One night, while the family was asleep, they were awoken by the sound of something scratching at their bedroom door. As they got up to investigate, they saw the door slowly creak open, revealing a dark figure standing in the doorway. They tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure slowly approached them, and as it got closer, they realized that it was the ghost of a Native American warrior. The warrior spoke to them in a language they didn't understand, but his message was clear. They were living on a cursed burial ground, and unless they found a way to break the curse, they would be consumed by it. The Jones family tried to leave the house, but every time they tried to go, they found themselves back inside. They were trapped, and they knew they had to find a way to break the curse before it was too late. They sought the help of a local historian who knew a lot about the history of the area. He told them that the burial ground had been the site of a great battle between two Native American tribes. The tribe that had been defeated had cursed the land, vowing that anyone who lived on it would suffer the same fate as their people. The historian also told them that there was a way to break the curse. They had to find a rare herb that only grew on the burial ground and use it to perform a ceremony to appease the spirits of the dead. The family set out to find the herb, but the burial ground was vast, and they had no idea where to start. They searched for days, but they couldn't find it. They were running out of time, and they knew that they had to find the herb soon if they were going to break the curse. Finally, they stumbled upon a small patch of the herb growing near a large stone monument. They gathered as much as they could and hurried back to the house to perform the ceremony. They set up an altar in the living room and began the ceremony. As they burned the herb, they could feel the presence of the spirits growing stronger. They could hear the whispers of the dead, but they didn't feel threatened. Finally, the ceremony was over, and the family collapsed exhausted onto the floor. As they looked around, they realized that the house was quiet. There were no more strange noises, no more objects moving on their own. They had broken the curse. The Jones family continued to live in the house for many years, but they never forgot the experience. They had learned to respect the land and the spirits of the dead. They had learned that sometimes superstitions are more than just stories, and that there are forces in this world that are beyond our understanding. But most importantly, they had learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope